Hello and welcome to another bicycle video. This is a video to help clear up some of the confusion of the weight scam video. Now, I made it very clear at the beginning of the weight scam video as a recreational video only, but the racing community kind of chimed in and everybody got confused and a lot of people got angry. I'm not sure why, but all we are is discussing how effective was a racing bike in the recreational use and the recreational community. And we are going to have another video today trying to clear up this confusion over what bike do you really need and what advantages are there to using these bikes. So we're going to start by trying to divide the recreational community from the racing community. These are bikes designed for very specific purposes. And if you are buying a racing bike for a recreational riding, there's no reason you can't. These bikes work fine as a recreational bike. But you will be paying extra for features that you can't use and probably will never use. And you are paying for a weight reduction that does very little. Now, you may be paying extra money for comfort. If you want the lightweight and comfort, then carbon is a good alternative, but so is titanium. And some of the newer aluminum bikes are now being sold as equal to or at the same comfort level of a carbon bike. Now, whichever material you use isn't the one and only answer. Design of the bike dictates how the bike handles, what the bike's going to be used for, and how comfortable it's going to be. You can make a comfortable aluminum bike. It takes some engineering, but you can do that. You can also make a comfortable carbon bike or steel bike or titanium bike. Now, the properties of the materials themselves lend themselves more to comfort and shock absorption. So, yes, if you choose a steel bike and it was well designed as the aluminum bike, you will probably find a better ride quality in the steel bike. That's why they still use steel forks or carbon forks on aluminum bikes. That's the limitation of the aluminum material. Now, as aluminum is refined and used better, these bikes are becoming more and more comfortable on the road. All my bikes are aluminum, and I don't with either steel or carbon forks, and they all ride fairly comfortably. I have some exceptions that do not. The straight blade fork is not what I call a good example of a high quality ride. The straight blade fork is another example of something coming from the racing community and ending up in the recreational community. And that's what this video is going to be about. These components and bikes that are crossing over and have always crossed over into the recreational community is basically confusing everybody and making bikes that really aren't what you want in a recreational ride. Now, what you want, of course, is as broad-based as the kind of riding you want to do. You can be choosing, such as this bike here, a comfort bike, which will be the slowest of all bikes, mainly because of the non-aerodynamic position. You will be sitting nearly straight up. You'll have a nice straight spine. And for a lot of beginners and for people with back problems, these bikes are the perfect solution to start riding. People that are very overweight also, these bikes are a good way to get started in your fitness and bring your weight down. And you can ride these bikes the rest of your life, or you can upgrade to something of the next step, such as a hybrid bike, which is kind of in between the aerodynamic position of your body of a road bike and a comfort bike. Now, these bikes are also determining your intent. If your intent is you just want to get on your bike and go for a 10-mile ride down the bike trail and come back. You don't want to wear special clothes. You don't want to do nothing extra. You just want to grab your bike and go. This is the pure recreational rider who just wants to get outdoors and enjoy a little bike ride. You don't do any specific fitness training or whatever. So your intent is highly specific to the kind of bike you buy too. And as your intent changes, you can always add a bike or trade in a bike. So if you were a beginner rider and you started off on a bike like this, and you decided, now that I'm more fit, I would like to ride more efficiently. That way I can go farther, faster. So you might choose the next step, and that would be a hybrid bike. This bike gives you an adjustable stem, so you can adjust how far down you go into an aerodynamic position of your body. And it has all the speed of a full road bike. After this, you may want to go to a full aerodynamic position of a road bike, or you may choose to go to a full aerodynamic position this of the fastest bike you can buy, and that's a time trial bike or a triathlon bike. So whichever bike you choose depends on your lifestyle, your present fitness, a lot of things. And the more experienced you are, the more accurate you're going to pick a bike. So once you've chose your bike, the most important next step is getting properly fitted to it. Now, your bike purchase should come from the results of a fit. If you're not fitted properly to the bike, all speed, all safety, and all physical fitness goes out the window. If you're just a little trail rider, you want to go 5 miles down the road, 5 miles back, most of this doesn't make that much difference. You can be out of position and whatever and still ride a bike. This video is for people with the intent of working their way up into a ride of anywhere from 20 to 100 miles. Anything over 100 miles becomes almost competitive again, and you're moving more into a racing environment. So for any recreational rider that's going from 20 to 100 miles, this is the range of bikes and a good choice and the choices that you have. So once you are fitted, and I have videos on fitting you can check out later, but once you are fitted correctly to the bike, then the most important thing comes, well, I'm fitted, but is it equipment or fitness that's going to make me fast or efficient? Is it going to make me fast over distance, or is it going to make me fast overall? So is it equipment or fitness? And the ratio is about, if you have chosen a bike in a 21-pound range, and you have gotten yourself into a aerodynamic position on a road bike, and you are now comfortable and fit in that position, then it is going up to another bike is only going to increase your speed on the flats a few percentage. Going to another bike in the mountains will maybe increase your speed overall 5%. So at the very, very most, the difference between equipment and fitness is 95% is you and 5% is the bike. Now that's after you're properly fitted to a bike, and we're using a baseline bike of about 21 to 22 pounds in a road bike configuration. Now I need to put those specifications in there because you can't go out and buy a Walmart bike that doesn't fit you and weighs 40 pounds and expect to get that same ratio. So we were just talking practical working bike here, and I gave an example of that in the weight scam video. So we are talking cyclist skill now. Your fitness, your lifestyle, and genetics. As to, how efficient you're going to be, how fast you're going to ride, how you're going to feel at the end of the ride. Your cyclist skill comes in the form of really smooth, very efficient pedal strokes, very comfortable on the bike, able to get out of the saddle and do different kinds of riding techniques to stretch out the body and just feel good on a long ride where you don't really have to get off the bike. When I go for a bike ride, I will never get off the bike unless I absolutely have to. There's no reason to. I would rather remain on the bike than stop and rest. I'd rather rest on the bike using different techniques. Next, of course, is your fitness level. As a beginner, you certainly won't have the same fitness level as a 5 or 10 year veteran. Next is your lifestyle. If you choose a impure lifestyle full of toxic foods, full of chemicals, alcohol, drugs, any lifestyle that's not pure will certainly sabotage any of your fitness, and you will not be able to go very far. And then finally we have genetics. Genetics cancels out a lot of things, and a lot of people want to look at the genetically gifted athletes and think that they can achieve these same levels. As far as I know, without drugs, no one has yet found a way to make a genetically inferior person equal to a genetically superior person. When you are born, you are given some gifts, and some people are not given those gifts. You're all given different levels of how we can apply fitness to our cycling. So a comparison of these is not a good idea. So along with equipment and fitness, a lot of times people are going, well, who is the fastest? And of course, who doesn't matter, because as genetics dictate, you can be genetically gifted and do everything wrong and still be faster than the most highly disciplined athlete. That's just one of the ways it works. I've seen people get drunk on beer the day before a race and still race better than nearly everyone in the group. Now, these people aren't going to be able to eat their potato chips and hot dogs and be able to race competitively with the rest of the gifted athletes. You're not going to eat hot dogs and potato chips, get drunk, and go out and race effectively in the Tour de France. But while you're out on the road, a lot of people are comparing themselves to everybody else who's riding. And that, again, is a big mistake. You could be on your comfort bike passing up these road riders on their high-tech $12,000 carbon bikes, thinking that, hey, I'm really good, I'm really fast. But unless you're actually in a race environment, out on the road, you have absolutely no idea what's going on, and it's not a place to do any kind of comparisons. For one, there's people out there that do intelligent training, which means every day of the week is different. One day may be a rest day where you're at 65% effort. That's a day that you could easily get passed by a guy on a comfort bike. Another day may be an injury repair day where you've been slightly injured and you're trying to ride it out, just bring some blood into the legs and do a very easy day. This might be a sub 40% effort day. So again, it's not a good idea to compare yourself to anyone except yourself. The only competition there is, the only fair competition out there, is you against yourself. So forget about comparing yourself to the high-level athletes. Forget about comparing yourself to who else is on the road, because none of that matters. All that matters is, what are you doing for the day? Your day of ride intent. And as I said, for some people, fitness isn't even part of the equation of why they ride. They just like to ride. They like to be outside. For those who like to ride and include fitness, then your day of ride intent becomes very important. If you just went for an all-out 80% effort over 100 miles, your next day should be an easy day because you are training intelligently, and if you want to be strong, you will need a rest day after an intense day. You may need 2 rest days. You may need 3-day rest days after a very intense effort. That's why intelligent people, intelligent training cyclists rarely do the same ride, the same throughout the week. Sunday, for the recreational rider, might be your longest ride day, or Saturday, or whatever. But I'm just using this as an example. Sunday might be a 100-mile century day. Monday might be a 30-mile, 65% effort recovery day. Tuesday, you might go out and like to do 10-mile time trials at all-out effort. Wednesday, you might want to go for a long, steady distance ride, which is about 75% effort over 60 to 75 miles, 50 to 75 miles. Thursday, you might want to do more fitness training, such as intervals or sprints or both, or combining hills. When it comes to recreational rider, how you train within each day is unlimited. So I wanted to go into this competitive comparisons. Again, just one more time. And as you're out on the road, you will undoubtedly want to compare yourself to other people. And you go, why are they going so fast on that bike? Why are they going so slow on that bike? Again, genetics is one of the biggest parts of the equation. And you don't want to follow other people's routines. You have to get to know yourself, get to know your body, and you want to be able to tailor-make your workouts for yourself. You start comparing yourself to genetically superior people, and you're going to injure yourself or burn yourself out very quickly. The next is, we're all given a certain body type. Some are ectomorphs, which are thin people that are hard to gain weight. Others are mesomorphs, which are are in between. They have good strength, they have good and medium body weight, and then there's the endomorphs, which are a powerful body. Now, each one of these bodies come with specific kinds of fast twitch, slow twitch muscle fiber, and of course you can train yourself outside those areas, but that's what you're born with. So your size, strength, and strength to body weight is what you're kind of born with. So if you got your body fat down to a good level, and for an endomorph, who is the power, if you're down to 15 to 20%, that's pretty good for you. And then a mesomorph will probably run well at 12 to 15, and the ectomorph can run very low at 8 to 12% body fat. So we all have a body that may not be as efficient on a bicycle as someone else's. As we can see in the Tour, the Tour de France, which combines strength, hill climbing, time trialing, combines everything, we find that the best overall body type seems to be somewhere between the ectomorph and mesomorph, which is they have good muscle structure with a good even amount of fast twitch, slow twitch fibers for power and endurance, and they have a good strength to body weight. So they weigh. So some of the best cyclists are only maybe 5'5" to 5'7" tall, because the extra height doesn't give you any advantage in bicycle racing. You can be 6'5", and there's very rare cyclists doing well at 6'5". You don't see too many 6'5"ers in the Tour de France, because you got to carry all that extra weight. And that's upper body weight is something you really don't need much of. So strength to body weight is another. And then skill and experience. Skill and experience can make up for a lot, because as you develop your pedal strokes and get very, very efficient on a bike with a nice pedal range where you can use power and strength and endurance all in the same ride to get yourself as far into the ride. So if you're doing an 80-mile ride, by combining all these skills and pedal strokes and how you ride, how you handle the bike, all these things come into play to make a very efficient 80 miles. And by I say efficient, that is, you are going to do a good speed over the 80 miles. You can come back in 4 to 5 hours from a ride like that with good efficiency for the average recreational rider. Next, we're going to go into this division. I want to divide the racing from the recreational. And I want to show you what the differences are. And this is why the bikes are different. This is why weight is extremely important in racing and hardly important in recreational riding. In racing, you're going to have the Peloton. Now, this is road racing. The time trial racing or the triathlon racing, where there is no drafting involved, that is actually very similar to recreational riding. And the same bikes can be used for those. But in road riding, in the Peloton, you're going to have drafting. And in drafting allows you to go faster than you normally would have the strength to do on your own. You can use the other riders to go faster, because over 18 miles an hour, you spend pretty much most of your energy pushing wind. So if you remove that wind, all of a sudden, riding at 25 miles an hour is just as easy as riding at 15 miles an hour, depending on the size of the draft. I have found it getting behind a truck doing 55 miles an hour is easier riding than 18 to 20 miles an hour on my own. When you remove that wind and you get in the draft of something that big, it is very easy to go fast. Now you might say, well, I'm going fast, but so why do I need a special bike if it's going to be that easy? While you're in a Peloton, and the more inexperienced the Peloton it is, the worse this gets. And that is the gaps between you and the person you're drafting will be continually changing. This continually changing gap has to be made up. And that means you have to speed up to bring yourself back up. And this isn't just this isn't a constant speed of the Peloton. The Peloton is always being attacked too. And as it's attacked, you're going to go from your little spin as you're sitting in a group to a full-out sprint to catch up. These little jumps and these big jumps in the Peloton uses up a lot of your energy. And that's why the weight of the bike, the weight of the wheels, is extremely important in racing. If you're going to race, you're going to need to buy a lightweight bike to be competitive. Now you compare that to the recreational community of a constant motion, where you are in almost either a time trial type ride or a recreational ride where you are just in a constant motion. There isn't any change of speed, only change of resistance. Resistance would be if you're going against the wind or with the wind, uphill or downhill. But your effort is controlled by you, and it's more constant. So without all this little jump and sprints going on, the weight doesn't really matter. Now we're talking practical weight here too. We're not talking 40 or 50 pounds. That will eventually weigh you down. We're talking practical, and I find the practical area for weight today with our technology is around 20 to 23 pounds. If you're buying a bike within 20 to 23, 24 pounds, you'll find these bikes are fairly efficient for the times that you need the weight reduction, and that is in climbing and acceleration. Every time you accelerate a heavier bike, it takes a little more effort than it does to accelerate a lighter bike. Now these efforts are very minimal. We're talking just a few seconds here in an acceleration, and only a few minutes overall in a long climbing day. So climbing and wheel weight versus the smooth cadence of consistent climbing. In racing, again, climbing, your wheel weight I've seen studies done both ways, and they are both contradictory. So in the real world of racing, it's probably correct to say that overall weight is the only thing that really matters. On the climbing, you're not accelerating in climbing. So this is consistent effort climbing over a long mountain range. If you're doing races over hills, that is a much different thing. We're talking sprinting over the top of the hills, or accelerating, or using the hills as a way to get gaps. That constant rolling over hills is quite a bit different than the consistent climbing you do in the mountains. So climbing and wheel weight, of course, in the mountains is necessary in racing, but again, in recreational riding, the smooth, consistent cadence of climbing, again, doesn't make much difference in the end. And then we have the sprints and jumps in the racing that, of course, sprints and jumps take full advantage of a lightweight set of wheels and a lightweight bike. This type of acceleration, weight is the most important. When trying to accelerate, the lighter weight you got, the better. Now you compare that to the recreational rider in acceleration, and we're not doing full acceleration. We are just simply accelerating from a stop, or we are accelerating from after climbing a hill, or as you get more skilled, cresting rolling hills, you may get out of the saddle and do a little jump or sprint to get yourself over the crest of a hill and keep your momentum up. It's another way of riding rolling hills where you don't bog down on each hill. You use the speed of the last downhill to bring momentum into the hill, and then you do a sprint jump to take you over the crest of the hill, and then you go down and do it again. It's a way of keeping a high momentum going in rolling hills that a recreational rider may use sometimes. And as a final part to racing, we have the racing rules as set forth by the UCI and a lot of other governing agencies who are trying to make racing fair and equal so that the best rider wins, not the best bike. So the UCI racing rules and restrictions for racing bikes have actually been a detriment to the recreational community, because we are still stuck a lot of times with the rules and regulations of racing when we want to buy just a plain road bike. We are stuck with the triangle frame, we are stuck with a spoked wheel, we are stuck with the aerodynamic restrictions. So we have design restrictions, which means our road bikes could be designed much more aerodynamic. They could employ even fairings up front, and we could gain maybe as much as 2 miles an hour by a bike, especially carbon bikes, since they can be formed in any way. They could form a carbon bike with a built-in airfoil or a built-in aerodynamics to have the wind smoothly wrap over the top of us and around us. If the wind is being moved away like that, most likely we're going to gain quite a bit of speed. Again, remember, most of the speed that you're losing on a bicycle is in wind resistance. Without fairings, of course, there's very little wind resistance you can do on a bike because there's not much exposed to begin with. You have some tubes exposed and some wires exposed. So if you put the wires inside the tubes and you make the tubes as aerodynamic as possible, you will pick up some, you will lose the air drag, some air drag. But you also have to remember that this air drag that you're losing off the bike itself, off of a conventional triangular frame or diamond frame, this aerodynamic gain is usually only felt in 25 miles an hour or more. As slower you get, down around the 18 point, you're not going to get much there in a bike. Now, as soon as you put a fairing on it and you remove your body from the wind, then the aerodynamic advantage becomes much greater. Again, the most restrictive thing on the bike is your body pushing through air. You can have the lightest weight bike you want, and you can have the best bearings in the world, but 95% of your effort is still going to be pushing through air over the 18 miles an hour. Now, there's air up to 18 miles an hour, but I like to use 18 miles an hour as kind of a cutoff rule because most people will get to this 18 mile an hour and then that's as fast as they ever get. And that's because to get faster, you either have to get more aerodynamic or stronger. And genetics will tell you after 5 years of training, genetics will limit your strength. So aerodynamics become the most important thing on the bike. And that's the one thing that the UCI takes away from us. So we can get more aerodynamic wheels, more aerodynamic frames, maybe airfoils, things that would really make a difference in our speed. And we can use the carbon fiber technology today because the bikes would definitely be heavier with airfoils and fairings on them. But we can use the carbon fiber advantage of today to maybe get a 21-pound bike with full aerodynamics that normally they would build at a 10-pound bike. So if you can take a 10-pound bike and add aerodynamics to it and make it a 20-pound bike, we still end up with a very reasonable weight, but we end up with aerodynamics that we can actually use. So the advantage of using a 10-pound bike and gaining maybe a half a mile an hour, or using a 20-pound bike and gaining 2 or 3 miles an hour, maybe even more, I'm not sure. None of this has really been tested in a road bike. The aerodynamics usually come in recumbents. And of course, recumbents are pushing maximum speeds way beyond a conventional bike. So if we remove the racing rules from the recreational community, which they should be but are not, we can end up with a lot of advantages. One of them is clothing. If you're concerned about riding fast and you're wearing loose clothing, you are losing your half mile an hour over. If you're doing 20 miles an hour wearing loose clothing, you've just lost yourself 1/2 of a mile an hour or more, depending on how much wind speed is out there. You have lost a lot. So just changing your clothes can actually make your 21-pound bike equal to the same speed as the most highest priced bike you can buy with the best bearings and everything else. By simply changing from loose clothing to an aerodynamic clothing, an aerodynamic helmet, if you're wearing a helmet, you will pick up more speed with the clothes than you would an expensive bike. And that kind of illustrates how little change there is in bikes. In all of this speed and everything we're talking about today, we're only talking a mile or 2 miles an hour. So we move on to what is the practical uses in the recreational community? What kind of bikes are the most useful? So for the rest of the video, we will be talking the practical side of riding recreationally. Again, this is a recreational video, not intended for racing. So one, we'll start with weight, and of course you can definitely feel the weight difference between a 21-pound bike and a 15-pound bike. The 15-pound bike is going to feel really like it's accelerating right out of your hands. It's going to feel really great. But what does that mean in real road miles? Practically nothing. As you go out and ride your average 60-mile loop, if you're going over mountains, you'll pick up 10% maybe on the climbs, and practically nothing in the flats. And that is about all you're going to get. You'll have the feeling of the weight reduction, which feels great, but in actual time on the bike or efficiency, it doesn't amount to much. So when is light enough? Well, the UCI has weight limits for fairness, but they also have it because they have found that a lightweight bike doesn't handle very well. Its maneuverability seems to be less than their minimum weight bike. It could be that once the bike gets light enough, input from the bike becomes very difficult to feel. That could be one. I'm just guessing here. I'm not sure. I've never ridden a 10-pound bike. The UCI seems to feel that maneuverability and safety in the racing is a problem. So that's why that is one of the main reasons they put a weight limit on there, as well as being fair. So we have racing rules and recreational riding, and as you can see from the video so far, the racing rules actually inhibit our recreational riding. For one, racing components, they may be lightweight, but again, none of this really applies to recreational riding. So the speed advantages in real life road riding are very, very small. And the Bike Aerodynamics, they can be the most aerodynamic bike in the world, but at 15 to 18 miles an hour of a recreational speed, again, practically nothing. Nothing even, you couldn't even measure it from day to day, because as your body changes, you could ride the same exact course every day, and because your body won't be exactly in the same condition as it is from day to day, you're not going to be able to come up on as you graph this out over maybe a 2-year period, your aerodynamic bike, I'm talking about aerodynamic tubes here, your aerodynamic bike with wires tucked in or whatever isn't going to make any difference that you can even graph out. The bikes that put your body in an aerodynamic position, now we're talking a big change. And I mean a big change in cycling community is 1 to 2 miles an hour. As I talked about the UCI rules, using technology for great recreational bikes. If we would be released from these racing rules, we could start seeing some really beautifully designed carbon bikes for the recreational rider. So it's a shame that that racing has influenced what everybody rides, when only probably 0.01% of every bike sold is actually raced consistently. And one of the things I checked out before I made this video is I was curious about wheel weight, frame weight, and flywheel momentum of the wheels. So as a recreational rider, conflicting results on wheel weight versus frame weight. When they put 4 pounds on the frame and they put 4 pounds in the wheels, in climbing or consistent effort, there wasn't any difference. The times were exactly the same in the climbs. And then another study showed that there was quite a bit of difference when changing from frame weight to wheel weight. So, as my half a century experience has taught me, in recreational riding, like I said, once you've gotten to a 21 to 22 pound bike, you've already got a very efficient bike, and the only way to get that weight down is usually with lighter wheels too, but a lighter wheel set will not last as long for a heavy rider as a lightweight one. So if you're a rider that's over 170 pounds, like I am, riding at 195, I use heavy-duty wheels, 36 spoke, lots of metal in the rim, very strong wheels. So my wheels are very heavy. Well, by racing standards, they're very heavy. They're still very light when you pick one up. I mean, they don't weigh that much. And I don't really feel that weight compared from my comfort bike when I climb and a racing bike when I climb. There's only about 5 inches of gear difference between my heavy 32-pound comfort bike or 32-pound adventure bike with fat tires and 26-inch wheels compared to my very lightweight set of 24-spoke wheels on my racing bike. There's only about 5 gear inches difference. And 5 gear inches difference on a 10 mile an hour climb, only a 1 mile an hour. So from my heaviest bike to my lightest bike, I can only find 1 mile an hour difference in constant speed climbing. Now in aggressive type climbing, such as the rolling hills where you're sprinting over the top, all that weight starts to make a difference. And if you like to ride aggressively, then a lighter weight bike and lighter weight set of wheels, you will enjoy more. As far as the flywheel momentum goes, I couldn't get much on that either. A lot of this stuff hasn't been tested. I know when I was riding long hours preparing for a race across America in the winters of Michigan, I would spend 6 hours on a wind trainer in January preparing for the race. And I found on a wind trainer, I used my regular set of wheels. Since there was no momentum from the bike, there was momentum from the wheel, but no momentum from the bike. Now the wheel has very little momentum because there's very little weight to it. And the bike carries most of the momentum. So I found my pedal stroke to be very clunky and very unrealistic. So I actually tied in heavy weights on my wheels to create that flywheel momentum. By creating that flywheel momentum, I was able to return to a more realistic road feel on my pedal strokes. So if you compare that to what's on the road and you put a heavier wheel on your bike, what makes the most sense that I've found out there is a heavier wheel on an inexperienced rider who is only using maybe a power stroke, who is only using out of the 360 degrees of the pedal stroke, they're actually only muscling through maybe 30% of it. So the heavier your rear wheel is going to carry your pedal stroke through all those empty areas, and it would probably be an advantage to a beginner rider who hasn't developed any pedal strokes, or for people that prefer not to use toe clips or be clipped to the pedals. Those people are losing a lot of that 360 degree part of riding. Now the more experienced you get, you're going to probably use at least 2 of the pedal strokes. You're going to use the downward stroke, and you're going to use probably the stroke through the bottom and slightly up as your main stroke. And as an alternate stroke, you may be coming across the top and down and then relaxing on the other side. You can use all four, but I've never found an efficient way to use all four pedal strokes, downstroke, through the bottom, up the back, push across the top. I've not found a efficient way to use that for an all-day ride. You use those when you're sprinting. You want to use as much of that 360-degree wheel as you can, or that of the crank as you can, to power yourself up. But as an efficient long-term method, I want to use two at a time. So for me, the flywheel weight would have to be different than for the cyclist who only uses the downward motion in maybe 30 degrees of total use, where I might be using 160 or 170 degrees of total use. I would need less weight in the rear wheel to carry through. And that's the best I can come up with for this type of practical use. Next is body position, aerodynamics, and comfort. They all kind of go together. And genetics too. Genetics will determine how flexible you can actually get. You can go through a stretching program, but you know, there are some people that are genetically gifted to be more flexible than other people. So again, we have to work with what we got. And your body position is only going to allow for your flexibility. And of course, as you get more and more aerodynamics, such as a racing bike, racing road bike, or a triathlon bike, you are so far over that body fat in the belly has to be minimal to be able to get over and be able to get your legs to clear your belly. So body position and aerodynamics is partially canceled out by comfort too. If you aren't comfortable in these positions, you will have to work your way down, and yet, like I said, you're only going to go so far, and genetics is going to take over. So you have fitness and training to get yourself into an aerodynamic position, but comfort will also be a part of it. So as a beginner, just being comfortable on a bike over 30 miles will be your first goal, because most people are going to complain about seat and back and hands, neck problems, all these things that your body's not used to. Next would be bike gearing. Again, from the racing to the recreational, it's been a total stupidity. My recreational bikes come with a 5211 gear. That's a 5211 gear. If you have a proper pedal stroke of 90 RPMs, that means your 5211 will be turning you over 30 miles an hour. There's not too many people on this planet that can turn a 5211 at 30 miles an hour unless you're going downhill with the wind. If you like to pedal downhill with the wind, then maybe this gearing's for you, but I have been re-gearing my bike with mountain bike gearing so that I now have a 4812 or a 4811 as my highest gear. And even a 4811 is more than I can use. 4812 is pretty much maxed out at when I'm pedaling down a 1 or 2% grade with a good tailwind. I can turn maybe 28 miles an hour and keep that up. Now for racing training with intervals, I use a 5011 gear, or 5012 gear, sorry. And that's the most I can train with. And your bike gearing needs to be optimized for your fitness level and terrain. If you live in the flats, your gearing is going to be completely different than mountain gearing. If you live in rolling hills, it's going to be a little in between. And last is the cyclist skills. This is the part that everybody's left out on the racing bikes. The cyclist skills can make the difference between riding a 24-pound bike faster than someone who's stronger than you riding a 16-pound bike. Cyclist skills can, in the pedal stroke, in your position, in your comfort level, in your endurance, in your lifestyle, in your genetics will come into it. All these things can make up a huge amount of difference. And this is the training we're talking about over the 5 years. The 5 years will build up your strength, but if you're not working on your skills in those 5 years, then you just handicapped yourself. If in that 5 years, all you've done is use the downstroke on your bike and you haven't used your hamstrings across the bottom and bringing up on the back of the stroke, then you haven't developed yourself completely. And there's much more speed you can find. And when I say much more, we're talking 1 and 2 mile an hour speeds here. But you'll find more speeds as you develop more skill. Also, the skill of handling. The way you handle the bike, the more you can stay on a straight line and not be weaving back and forth, the faster you're going to go. Now, a lot of this is very minor that you can't see on the road. So if you think that you are weaving a little bit back and forth, you need to get on some rollers and test yourself out. If you get on rollers and you can't stay on them, if you, with your best effort, you just ride right off of them, then you have work to do in your cycle skills. You should be able to ride within a 2-inch center line on rollers. You should be able, once you've reached that skill level, then when you get to because the rollers will double the amount of input that the road has. So once you get out on the road, that means you'll be weaving very, very little. So when you're on rollers, the more you can ride in a perfectly straight line, the better you are going to be on the road. Skills also include handling, of course. And that has to do with the safety. You do not want to exceed the speed of what you can safely handle your bike. If you're new to cycling and you ride down the side of a mountain at 50 miles an hour and a deer or a chipmunk or a squirrel or a rabbit or anything that can happen, you come around a corner and there's a rock slide. If you're riding beyond your skill level, all of this safety measures, your helmet, everything else, isn't going to matter much. At 50 miles an hour, if you take a headshot, the helmet's not going to protect you. All it's going to do is keep you from scraping the top of your head. You're going to receive a huge amount of trauma to your head. These people that think they can just strap on a bicycle helmet and crash, these people do not know what they're talking about. Make sure you understand this, that cycling skills is what's going to keep you healthy on your bike. I'm going to do a video on cycling skills so that people will understand what they need to do to be a cyclist. You can do any sport you want, but you're not going to be safe in any of these sports until you have the correct fitness and skills. No sport is going to be safe. So next we have something that isn't talked about either. Everybody wants to say, oh, this material is better than this material is better than that. And of course, the cycling skills are again left out. And these are comfort skills. The comfort skills is the ability to feel the road through the handlebars and compensate with your legs in the saddle. It was never intended for you to have full weight on a saddle and take the bumps of the road. When you hit a large enough bump, and you get the feedback through your arms, you need to develop the skill to naturally lift yourself slightly off the saddle by pushing a little harder on the pedals. You push yourself slightly off the saddle, and you let the bike rise up and come back down without your full contact with the saddle. This is how you develop comfort over the long miles. It's not the bike, it's the skill. You can buy a bike that would absorb this kind of shock, but it would also absorb a huge amount of your cycling energy. And you would come back from a 100-mile ride with a full suspension bike on the road with pretty much more fatigue than you would on a rigid bike. Now, of course, Bikes are designed to absorb some of that shock, but when you look at a frame, you know how little it's going to absorb. We're talking at the most a millimeter of movement. So with the cycling skills, we have pedal strokes to increase our efficiency on the bike. So if you want to have the ultimate efficiency on the bike, instead of spending $10,000 and hoping to get it through weight reduction, which you will not, you need to spend the time and develop your pedal strokes. That's one of the reasons intelligent trained cyclists have different days. There may be a day that's just designed to spin, a day to increase your cadence speed. Because if you can have a long range of cadence from 80 RPM to 120 RPM, you can use that throughout the day. You can use your power muscles at 80 RPM and then going up a hill, and then you can rest at the top of the hill at the top of the hill you're going to shift up and keep the 80 cadence on a very light stroke as you recover a little bit, and then you can switch to a more endurance fiber by going to 100 RPMs. These pedal strokes will give you more efficiency on the bike, and again, this cyclist skill will add much more speed and much more efficiency to your riding than the weight reduction of a bike so in other words, you can spend money on this and get very little return, or you can just spend very little money and do the skills and end up with a much higher return. With cycling, there's usually only two goals, other than you may use your bicycle for transportation. That's one. One of the goals may be just to get outside and enjoy the outside for a little bit. Or it may be all three, fitness included. If your goals are fitness and wanting to explore places far away that the only way to reach it is by bike, then I would work on my efficiency instead of saving my money for an expensive bike. These expensive bikes are not going to do the work for you. They're going to do some, but very, very little in the recreational community. They help out the racing cyclists quite a bit, but in the recreational realm, they do not. So as a final to the cyclist skills, is a summary, and the most important thing is position. You need fitted correctly, and you need to get for speed and efficiency, you need to be in the most aerodynamic position as possible. And that should not be at the price of comfort. So you are going to compromise comfort and position somewhat. But position in the aerodynamic way is going to give you 95% of your speed. The bike can only give you the other 5%, and that's only when you go from a 22-pound bike to a 16-pound bike. You will pick up a little, but you will never make up the difference of the cycling skills. You will never have the endurance from intelligent training between endurance and power training, and you will never pick up the speed that you can in a good aerodynamic position from good flexibility and training on the bike. Next, of course, is lifestyle. If you do not accompany your fitness with clean food and clean living, then it's all for nothing. You'll never have the energy to continue in a day after day fitness style if you sabotage yourself with horrible food, late nights with no sleep, and the wrong kind of supplementation. And then we have genetics, and that genetics I include because I don't want you to compare yourself to other people. I want you to lay down your baseline of your skills, of your fitness, and I only want you to compete with yourself. For those of you that, again, that don't care about the fitness, that just want to ride bikes for the fun of it, of course, this video really doesn't matter for you. Like I said, you can ride a badly fit bike for 5 miles down a bike trail and come back and be perfectly happy. But for those of you who want to enjoy the outdoors, to enjoy a fitness lifestyle, to control your weight, and give yourself extra energy throughout the day, then this video is just for you. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.